Director Luca Guadagnino and writer David Kajanic created a truly unique piece of work when they made 2018's Suspiria. While this may seem to be a glaring contradiction, given that it's a remake, it's the case, nonetheless, that there's nothing quite like this film. That's true of its surface qualities, its narrative and so on, but also its rich depth of subtext. It's this latter that we wish to talk about today. Suspiria 2018 is a genuine cinematic onion, with layer after layer of meaning packed beneath its surface. However, whilst it incorporates many diverse subtextual threads into its weave, the central one, arguably, is concerned with the following. 1. How our fundamental psychological states are influenced and develop. 2. How those psychological states then inform our adherence to ideologies. And finally, 3. How those ideologies can become fanaticism. Let's break it down. According to Freud, the prime elements of personality are comprised of the id, the superego, and the ego. The id is our irrational, primitive side. It is not centered in objective reality and consequence. It is selfish, concerned with desires and impulses. The id can be further reduced to its constituent elements of thanatos, the death instinct, and eros, the life instinct. Unsurprisingly, we will mostly be dealing with the thanatos aspect here. The superego, by contrast, is the idealized self and is concerned with conscience, ethics, and the learned morality of the society it develops within. The ego is the mediator between the two, allowing us to function in daily reality, and is about rationality and practical reasoning. In Suspiria, these concepts are realized in representations and as personifications in order to impart its overall philosophy on the nature of our ideologies and the fanatical distortion of them. We first meet central character Susie Banan as a young woman in the midst of discovering who she is, with snippets from her childhood, growing up in a strict Mennonite community, dripped into the narrative along the way. Susie's mother is what can only be described as a religious zealot. Upon finding her daughter exploring her entirely natural sexuality, her response is a knee-jerk one, based on impulse, fear, and aggression. It is to torture her own child. In this moment, she has lost her reason, her compassion, the teachings of her religion, and even her obligations as a mother, all of which are subsumed, stripping her from being a fully faceted human being. She has become base, irrational, radicalized by her religion, a human being reduced to volatile reaction. She has become the id. Moreover, she has become Thanatos, the death instinct, which is responsible for reactive aggression, domination, and violence. Being subjected to these three things has often been observed to have a reproductive effect in those on the receiving end. They can echo personally, socially, generationally, even nationally and beyond. We are presented with a moment in which the psychological machinery of a child might be damaged, and may result in future damage, directed outwards into the world, perhaps in the form of parental, religious, or political rage. In any case, it marks the beginning of Susie's split from the Mennonite community, as well as the inception of her dreams of escape, which continue throughout her childhood. Her mother's reactionary response to these plans is to other her own offspring, to treat her with out-group hostility, further aligning her with the Thanatos aspect of the id. For her part, Susie is logical, methodical, and controlled, making her plans a pragmatist. She has become the film's manifestation of the ego. When she finally realizes her life's goal and arrives at the Tanz Academy in Berlin, a foreign city far removed from the rural environment of her upbringing, she behaves in accordance with the scenario, but exercises full control over her awe, her fear, and later, even her higher morality, a balancing act required of the ego, whom she can be seen to represent. Her willful practicality allows her to advance at the academy.
Sometimes I only need to be told twice. I want to be this company's hands.
Even as she grows and develops, not yet knowing precisely what she is and will become, she enacts practical changes to the steps of the dance Volk. This is important, and we shall explore it later, but for the purposes of this section it remains another example of deliberate, willful, practical enactment by, quote, this company's hands, or subtextually, the ego. The only real lapses of her self-control are when under the influence of Marcos or the other witches, for reasons that will also be explored later. Fortunately for Susie, she is also influenced by the glow, a higher light which guides her. This can be seen as the manifestation of the superego and is in conflict with the id. In the finale of the film, Susie is guided by the glow, the light, the superego, if you will, to the final staging of events, the ritual chamber, which beneath the narrative can be viewed as a metaphorical furnace wherein psychological aspects are blended and forged, or discarded as steaming slag. In this place, all of Susie's external mother figures in their capacity as influences on her psyche must be addressed, as they vie for the direction of Susie's final psychological outcome. Firstly, in the form of the out-of-her-depth centrist Blanc.
I can take all of this from your head. You can forget everything.
Who has, throughout the film, been ineffective before Susie's second mother influence, that of the out-of-control Marcos, and who remains powerless against her still in these final scenes. More on that later. However, where Blanc has failed, Susie will assess and judge Marcos, assert her control as the ego.
For whom were you anointed? Which of the three mothers?
Mother Suspiria.
I am she.
And discard her as the parasitic influence on her coalescing psyche that she is. The third mother figure is that of her actual earthly mother, who does not need to be present here in the image of that character, because her influence is, naturally, already in play, and has been since Susie's childhood. Instead, she is represented as the manifestation of death itself, who Susie must summon to the surface, control, and incorporate in order to become complete. Death is played by actress Malgosia Baylor, who is the same actress that plays her mother. This is far from accidental. Here, in the confines of the Academy, where metaphors are made flesh, it is fitting that Bella plays Thanatos, the death instinct. She is, of course, Susie's id, in the distorted child's nightmare image of her mother, the abuse she inflicted on her made manifest. It is not necessary to have seen it to understand this film, but if there were any doubt, Argento's Inferno also presents death as another aspect of the mother, as opposed to an outside entity. Only here, Guadagnino and Kajanik have ingeniously extrapolated the idea to encompass the thematic meaning of the piece. It is at this point that Susie becomes one with the glow, one with the death figure, and becomes whole. The glow becomes reminiscent of a halo, the chest opening to a roiling black substance reminiscent of the flesh of death. The id is, after all, the hidden darkness, usually concealed deep within our secret hearts. Neither the glow or the death figure are seen beyond this point in the film, because this is the moment of incorporation, of assimilation. The id, the superego, and the ego are joined in equilibrium, and Susie is now Mother Suspiriorum, master of the Coven, a symbol of perfect psychological and political balance, having overcome all other imperfect psychological influences which might have tainted and unbalanced her. At this point, anyone familiar with Suspiria 2018 is aware that actress Tilda Swinton played 3 different roles in the film. As with Malgosia Baylor, we do not consider this to be an accident or a case of mere self-indulgence. Conversely, it is easier to see consistent subtextual relevance in the choice. Once more, we have 3 characters who can be seen as representing fundamental psychological states, though, unlike Susie, they are not on a journey of self-recognition and evolution towards perfect balance. They represent the opposite end of the spectrum to Susie, playing into the reoccurring motif of cycles of psychological damage and the consequent corruption of ideologies on a generational level. These are old characters, in 2 cases possibly ancient characters, who have already reached their imperfect psychological end states and are fixed within them. Ironically, they are more human in this, their imperfection, their imbalance, their fallibility, no matter how inhuman 2 of them are. The character Klemperer is written as a psychiatrist, something we believe to be another very deliberate decision. He is the exponent of compassionate reason itself, as well as the bearer of ethical regret regards the consequence of his past decisions. He is emblematic of civilization, civilized behaviour. He is the flawed superego, and as such can only occupy a safe and stable political equilibrium. But civilization and compassionate reason are all ill-equipped to deal with the unreasonable and uncivilized nature of the id when it is allowed to grow and become powerful. This is portrayed in two ways, the second of which we'll talk about later. This first iteration occurs through Marcos, who is the very essence of the id unchained, entirely self-serving at the expense of all learned morality, all consequence to others, and ultimately all consequences to herself. Appropriately, she occupies the dark basement depths of the academy, just as the id occupies the dark basement depths of our minds. The third piece in this trinity is Blanc. Unlike Marcos, she is not, in narrative terms, evil, or more accurately, for our subtextual purposes, uncensored instinct and desire, but she is also far from good. She occupies a middle ground of organisational practicalities and cooperation, running the daily affairs of both the academy and the socio-political coven behind it. She represents the flawed ego, holding by rules, if not ethics per se, including political ones of internal democracy. But precisely as with the Klemperer character, the democratic rules she has relied upon in the past cannot contain the unchained id that is Marcos, as is mirrored when any society encounters an unfettered fanatical ideology which threatens civilization, rules, and reason. We shall explore this notion further, and how it pertains to these characters as representations, now. We've spoken a lot about psychological states and psychological development in this video, because it is our psychological makeup that informs our inclinations towards certain ideologies and our vulnerabilities to fanaticism. Suspiria understands this and uses these psychological components in the forms thus far discussed as the foundation for its political commentary, a commentary which has never been more pertinent or more prescient.
It's all a mess, isn't it? The one out there, the one in here, the one that's coming.
Nazi Germany did not happen overnight. It was a process of evolution. Those that helped give birth to its horror, some of whom would later become victims of it, first saw themselves as rescuing their country from the poverty and hyperinflation caused by shattering war reparations incurred after Germany's defeat in World War I. For context, by the end of 1923, German currency was essentially worthless, with some sources estimating 4.2 trillion German marks to be the equivalent value of just one American dollar. People literally burned money as kindling because it was cheaper than buying wood. Other factors were at play too, of course. Rarely is a society careening from the rails of sanity the product of just one thing. Nonetheless, the political and economic toll of reparations was instrumental. In this formative period, a resurrection of fierce nationalistic pride seemed to be a good thing to a lot of people. The remains of Auschwitz-Birkenau stand as a mute testament to how that philosophy unfolded. Similarly, the RAF, or the Red Army faction, was born from an honest frustration and justified rage at a system which seemingly rewarded, or at least overlooked, the former Nazis in its midst, who held positions of power in both the government and in business. After everything that had transpired in Germany and at the hands of Germany, many amongst the younger generation found this to be entirely untenable. They weren't alone, and initially the RAF enjoyed some public support. It was certainly seen by its members as a positive force, a force for good. However, any support that they may have enjoyed bled away as the group disappeared into a chaos of extremism and terror. Against this backdrop of unresolved post-Second World War trauma, we, as the audience, meet the Coven as it dances towards the precipice of its own descent into fanatical madness. We encounter them during a schism in their internal politics. In the absence of Mother Suspiriorum's leadership, they have descended into factionalism, with the group's majority vote resulting against the all-too-willing to compromise centrist Blanc in favour of Marcos, who has declared her own legitimacy by divine right. She is neither the first dictator nor the first tyrannical state to associate themselves with the historical cultural symbol, and to claim some form of manifest destiny to justify horrific crimes and a consolidation of absolute power. Blanc can accommodate Marcos's influence and shift her own Overton window in a vain attempt to appease all she likes.
Mutter wollte das so.
Ich dachte, wir wollten sie nicht mehr so nennen.
Marcos and the Marcosites are not interested.
Jetzt will Mutter sie haben.
As with parallels in real life, the more she compromises, the more they will demand, until there is nothing but Marcos and her ideology. But the Coven was not always this way. We are given hints of past unity, and of a time under the leadership of Mother Suspiriorum in a previous incarnation, wherein the perpetration of their present crimes would not have been permissible.
I regret what my daughters did to you. I wasn't in a position to prevent it.
Perhaps this descent into cruelty was the result of a spiritual callousing, the price of surviving the Nazi regime as an autonomous female collective.
There are two things that dance can never be again. Beautiful and cheerful. Today we need to break the nose of every beautiful thing.
As Suspiria is keen to highlight, the damage caused by personal abuse and by political totalitarianism both result in psychologically destructive ripples until a point of mental and emotional equilibrium can be achieved in those affected. Within this political maelstrom we meet minor character Griffith. If each Coven member embodies some role, the hands, the spine, the sex, the heart, then she is surely this company's eyes. She has watched the radicalization of her people over time and is complicit in its degeneration. She is the Nazi Party member frozen by her own rigidity in support of a cause she no longer believes in, watching in horror as the books are burned in the streets and her neighbours are taken away in the night. She is the vocal conservative wringing her hands as her own right to reproductive health care is dismantled. As the vote for Marcos comes in, the cost of extrication from her own entrenchment in fanaticism is too high, whilst at the same time her disgust at what the group is becoming is too much. Her choices have narrowed to one. We are far from the notion of evil as portrayed in most other horror films. This is the evil of ideologies becoming their own unstoppable avalanche, as those within are swept along, either caught up in the madness or sometimes consumed by it. If Griffith was this company's eyes, then Klemperer is all of us, in his role as the witness. The ritual in which he is terrorized represents all societies that have, are currently, and will be seduced by the compelling power of fanaticism. Klemperer is every civilized person who believes in the reason, stability and sanity of collectively understood ethics and the rule of law, beyond the point where evidence suggests that those still hold sway. This brings us back to the second example, put on hold from earlier in this essay, in which compassionate moral reason in and of itself is no match for the brute force compulsion of the uncivilized id. Klemperer has already been here, witness to the Nazi regime that took his wife, even as he struggled to believe that such a thing was possible. But more broadly, he is also a future you, watching in an understanding which has come too late, as those same ethics and rules are trod beneath the boot of fascism. He is a future me. He is a warning to all of us potential witnesses. And this is an important point to understand. Suspiria is not a film about Nazis, or the RAF, or Germany. It's about then. It's about now. It's about the rough beast yet slouching its way towards us to be born. Everything that happens within the walls of the Academy is a metaphor for this, and for the psychological underpinnings which make us vulnerable to it, as participants in it, as compromisers with it, and as helpless witnesses to it. What it is not is retroactive judgment on a specific set of people in a given time or place, made from a safe, more loftier space. We are not safe, and Suspiria knows this.
Why is everyone so ready to think the worst is over?
But back to Volk, which we briefly touched upon earlier in the video. The word Volk translates to people. In terms of German nationalism, the word incorporates darker connotations, as with its extrapolation to Herrenvolk, or master race, and its use in Nazi political sloganeering, such as Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer, or one nation, one empire, one leader. In the film, the Vul Dance is a magical invocation of supernatural power. Subtextually, it is a representation symbolizing direct political influence.
When you dance the dance of another, you make yourself in the image of its creator.
As Susie develops, she is not content to become a vessel of fascism, so she changes it, exerting her own influence over the political future of the Coven, as is consistent with her role of the ego, or this company's hands. The fact that she is, at first, unsuccessful brings us back to another alluded-to thread from earlier. The only lapses in Susie's self-control being when under the influence of Marcos or the other witches. Susie cannot yet enact full political change because she is still growing and learning about the world, struggling to make order of the unbalanced representations at large in the academy and present from her past, who are vying for their share of her burgeoning psychological makeup and the resultant effect on her ideology. But beneath the surface narrative, this is not a film about saviours. While Susie is eventually presented as such in service of a compelling story, in a subtextual sense, what she has done is only what each of us must try to do. She has acknowledged, understood, and healthily incorporated the warring components that exist within all of us, and which act collectively in a given society for the direction of our ideologies, movements, systems, and governments. In this successfully balanced capacity, she can mediate these parts of herself as the ego and act wisely. The saviour represented is a personal one, which has evolved from within, born through knowledge of oneself and of the world through experience and learning, in a process which we can aspire to emulate, if imperfectly. There is, after all, only one Mother Suspiriorum.
I am she.
And it is outside the reach of mere mortals to attain divinity. But perhaps this is as it should be. While Suspiriorum grants Clemperer a dubious mercy in erasing the memories of those he failed to save, as this scene subtly illustrates, scars on the world remain, even as the children of the next generation play about them, oblivious. We must remember and come to terms with those scars, that pain, or feel the harmful effects of their unquiet influence and their tendency to repeat. And there we have it. 3 sets of 3, a trinity of trinities, not insignificant both for its iconography within organized religion and in non-proselytizing pagan ones, but which here add up to one very intelligent, interesting film. There's more to mention, so much more. The Ruth Brie allusion made by Tanner, the divergence from one religious group into the Amish and Mennonite sects, the non-directly political aspects such as the film's queer coding, but we'll leave those under the themes for someone else to explore, or perhaps for a later video of our own. So, finally, the question must be asked. Is all of this bullshit? Well, as with many examples within art, it is possible for the viewer to walk away from a piece having experienced exactly what they brought to it themselves. We're not going to claim absolute authority over this art and declare it calcified into one specific shape. We know that's the YouTube way, of course, and that it's much more comforting to compartmentalize that which seems elusive. But that's not our way. Easy is boring, comforting is boring. Art is meant to be explored and interpreted, and that's how we like it. You've got another interpretation of this film, great, let's hear it. We love art that breathes, that changes, has different evolving facets and stories. The question should more reasonably be, does this theory work? And can it be expected to be understood by a viewing audience like ourselves who don't have a bunch of degrees and other exclusive knowledge under our belts? As far as the former goes, well, we've just spent a long time delving into the theory, so yeah, we think it works. I'm sure there are psychology students out there studying for doctorates that have very specific uses for some of the terms herein, and might say that we've mischaracterized them. But as far as we, the general movie-going public, are concerned, how most of us would understand them at the layman's level required to spot their use in a film,
monsters from the id,
we reckon we're on solid ground. And we do believe that a general understanding of the world, as opposed to a highly niche understanding of a subject, is a vital facet for a film to be successful, at least for us. It's why I'm not a fan of the killing of a sacred deer. Unless you've studied ancient Greek myth, you're probably not going to pick up on what that film is doing when you first watch it. It has other aspects which we liked, but that specific requirement needed to understand what the film was at its core felt a little exclusionary. And that brings us to the latter point. Can this film be understood without a whole bunch of niche research? When I first saw Suspiria at the cinema, I would say I got about a third of its psychological themes, and the majority of its political ones, if not the intricate specifics of either. It was enough to make it a compelling film, one that I couldn't stop thinking about for weeks, and I mean this film really got in my head. It was almost like possession. Upon a second viewing, this time when the German 4K disc came out, I got more of it, and that only made it more exciting. It's not important to know what the German autumn was, or understand the Thanatos element of the id. There's enough here intrinsically for you to get the film, and its messages. Whilst it is a film that requires you to think, everything you really need is fundamentally there, contained within the film. If you then choose to look more things up on your own, fantastic. Other layers of the onion have just opened up before you. It's not a film for everyone, and of course we have no problem with people not enjoying it. We do think that in a world where we hear horror fans crying out daily for material that isn't spoon-fed and obvious, that respects horror fans' intelligence, and which is original, that it at least deserves our respect. Anyway, that'll do from us. We're not going to bore you with the usual like and subscribe stuff. You either liked this video and want to subscribe, or you didn't. Instead, we like to share the love. Grumpy Andrew's Horror House is a fantastic channel for horror lovers. Andrew's a lovely chap, and he's also written a rather good anthology novel called 17 Stories of Death and Desire, which folks might enjoy. So, until next time, take care.